Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to share with you some thoughts and comments that I have about another film that is directed by the great Japanese artist Takeshi Kitano. This falls, in terms of his feature film filmography, as his second film that he directed, and he's also credited as writer. So this is an interesting work that continues to fascinate even to this very day. This is from 1990, and the name of the film is 3-4X 10月. It is often referred to in English as Boiling Point. A very interesting and quite enigmatic title, at least seemingly so. But it is also one that has links to baseball. 3-4X seems to be referring to this idea of baseball scores, perhaps. And then 10月 is the word in Japanese for October. This happens to be the Blu-ray that I have from Japan, and there is a baseball motif already in the front cover in terms of the baseball bat. And that's very important too, because the theme of baseball, local baseball, is one of the central themes of this film. Not in terms of a baseball sports drama per se, but it's used in a way to show camaraderie among people in this local scene. And it's used to show the way in which relationships are forged, are mended, are broken, but are repaired, and how they go forth in terms of daily human interactions. And along the way, we get many comedic elements. We get the absurdity of certain human constructed moments. There is some potty humor. There is also some there are some really physical comedy slapstick moments that are brilliantly designed, and we always have to remember Takeshi Kitano does have his roots as a comedian and entertainer, and he's still very popular as a comedian and entertainer in Japan today. He's known as Beat Takeshi. So this film has all those elements of a kind of how should I say, a drama with baseball ties to it. It is also a Yakuza film, and that is true because there are a number of characters that either are Japanese gangsters or that run in or have run-ins with Japanese gangsters, and that forms part of the propulsion of the plot of the film. With respect to various interactions with Yakuza members, leading to a decision to want to go to Okinawa, or a number of young men wanting to go to Okinawa as a plot to seek revenge. And one of the ways they want to do this is to try to obtain a weapon, a handgun, a firearm in Okinawa. And then to do that, they have to engage the assistance or services of local gangsters in Okinawa. And that is where the director, Takeshi Kitano, becomes the performer and actor, Beat Takeshi. And he is here in this film as well. So we get a lot of Takeshi, just as we did with the earlier film, その男凶暴につき, or Violent Cop. So we get Takeshi Kitano behind the camera, and we get Beat Takeshi, the same person, but Beat Takeshi in front of the camera. Here it's the same thing. Also in the context of a crime-related story, this time focusing in perhaps more primarily so on Yakuza, but still this is a gangster element that we will see play out quite prominently in a number of other Takeshi films, Kitano films going forward. So that's the essence of the story, I would say. and the baseball connections there. And there are some indications, as I indicated, or I've indicated some indications of the way in which comedy is constructed. This film is filled with a lot of these brilliantly constructed, almost mood pieces or set pieces that are quite, they really walk the line quite skillfully between the outrageously funny, comedic funny on the one hand, and also the horrific and violent and quite shocking on the other. And it holds these two feelings simultaneously. And there's also a sense of the sadistic that plays itself out in these comedic ways. And in any other context, let's say on a Japanese TV comedy show with Takeshi, beat Takeshi, these sorts of comic scenes might play themselves out for the purpose of causing laughter among the audience. And it would be very successful in that way, sort of comic programs involving slapstick sketch scenes that have a punchline involving maybe another person getting hurt or injured or something, and then that would be the end of the sketch scene. Here we have that same type of philosophy played out, but it feels also having a very violent and cruel edge to it, such that we really get a sense in these presentations just how morally dangerous or morally ambiguous a lot of these characters are. In particular, or for example, how certain women are treated in this film and in this particular world that's being portrayed here. There are a lot of instances where this kind of edge leads to circumstances or consequences that can be maybe funny on the one hand, but then we realize that maybe there are some really disturbing undercurrents that then become quite prominent. And so there is a certain evolution or turn in the way that certain sensibilities play themselves out. So in other words, there's a real undercurrent of danger, of moral ambiguity, and of a lot of uncertainty. And I think that's what makes this film one of the secrets of its success, really, is just how well and how unexpected it makes those turns. Also, I was mentioning how this film seems to be composed a lot of certain set pieces that might seem to be also like comedy sketches or that sort of thing, or bravura shots, or moments of levity, so to speak. There are some great moments of beach scenes, seaside scenes, which is a very prominent motif in Takeshi Kitano's filmography going forward. But there is also in these set pieces a function. And they are very well constructed, so brilliantly constructed, because they either serve to push forward the plot in one way that can be maybe imperceptible at first glance, but then when we really get into it, we realize, oh, this is actually very significant in terms of furthering the plot forward. Or they could be showing certain developments of character and how those character developments end up becoming very significant to the plot going forward. So this is all to say that whenever we see certain moments of, let's say, maybe random set pieces that might not necessarily at first glance seem to be going anywhere, on careful inspection, one, I think, can really come to see that they actually have a really significant and crucial, critical element to not just showing these moments, but also of pushing the film forward, either in character development or in plot development, or both. So that's, I think, a really brilliant design, and it's almost invisible or imperceptible. And that's one of the reasons why I think this is a great example of Takeshi's cinema, especially during these early years of his career, of his filmography. And there are some brilliant moments of stillness. We've seen this in his earlier film, but the way he employs stillness, the randomness of things, people act in a way that seems antithetical to the genre. When we see gunplay, there doesn't seem to be the same sense of urgency or genre action that we might expect from other genre films of a similar nature. But rather, he seems to be taking a somewhat antithetical route, which is brilliant in terms of its artistic design, namely the reliance on stillness, the reliance on close-up shots that are held for a certain period of time, often the case. We see how the shots of faces are framed, not necessarily in the center of the frame, maybe they're in the lower part of the frame to reveal a lot of space in the top part of the frame. We see moments where the camera holds and then it makes certain jumps of edits in interesting places. We see time shifts, how time seems to be out of whack in certain key moments. And we see ways that the environment and flowers and the sea and sky also serve not just as visual comic punchlines, but also as a means of a artistic design. Because when we think more about Kitano and his wide range as an artist, we understand that he is a visual artist as well as being a comedian and entertainer and performer and filmmaker. So we have these visual flourishes, his use of the natural environment to comic effect, but also to creative effect, and both. And we see also how his composition of frames, the way he uses characters, the way they interweave, they walk in and out of frame, there is a sense of a, how should I put it? There is a sense almost like a really interesting grammar, cinematic grammar that Takeshi Kitano is constructing. It's almost like he is really trying to boil things down to their essence and really showing us the essence. And then from that boiled down essence, he then gives us many variations on a theme. And through that process, we see, as I say, varying extremes expressed, whether they be extremes in stillness and composition or then sudden bursts of violence. Sometimes there are some shots that are very composed. Other times they can be really free form and the like, and quite vivid. There's one very famous scene involving a karaoke sequence and singing. So that is, I think, an example of the extremes to which the camera work is going. And bless Kitano for that. I think that's a really great mixture, a volatile mixture, and wonderfully volatile mixture of forms. And last but not least, let me say that the film seems also, in my view, to be capturing or encapsulating or somehow portraying elements of, for lack of a better phrase, what I consider to be Japaneseness, or the elements of day-to-day Japanese society, little things, little details, little bits of the frame, little things that the characters eat and the like, that I think really show a kind of a conscious effort to show something of the Japanese. And what do I mean? So, for example, not to say that baseball is exclusively a Japanese sport. Obviously, it's not. But there's this sort of culture that develops around baseball, and what people say during certain parts of the game. Certain phrases that are used, and the way that people react, people who are really into baseball, how they react to the games. And so I think that's captured really nicely in the baseball aspect of this film. And also there are some really key ways that the names, how names, first name and last name, how the names of people and the sort of unspoken, well, guys, the rules on how to address other people, the polite forms, how that becomes a very key plot element, especially in the Japanese gangster Yakuza part of the plot. And so that's another way in which the idea of the use of the suffix "san" to the last name of a person. So my name is Beppu. So someone who maybe doesn't know me or maybe is maybe meeting me for the first time might address me as maybe Beppu-san. So that san becomes very significant in day-to-day polite interactions with people. There are, of course, exceptions to the rule. You don't have to use san in certain scenarios or certain relationships. So, but that general rule is a key part of one of the very famous aspects of this film. So that's another example, I think, of how this sense of Japanese names or language is being employed very effectively. And there are other similar aspects of that nature. The way that ice cream is shown. I love this moment too. The film also is about relationships between men, and they act like boys. They act like kids. And I'm going to use the word juvenile, but I don't mean it in a negative connotation, but I mean juvenile in the sense that these are just men that are acting like boys, and their interactions with women. But the focus is, I would say, almost entirely on the men and their interactions, and they act like children, and their relationships are based on that. And so we have relationships where people are just suddenly mad at each other, and they're in the playground and they hurt each other, and then that can sometimes lead to really big consequences, and that leads to the Yakuza part of the storyline. But that kind of kids on the playground type of mentality carries through even in the Yakuza storyline all the way through the end. And so we see one instance where sometimes kids are playing and then suddenly they get into a fight, and sometimes that fight is so irreparable that it just leads to these bigger consequences. The problem, of course, for the characters in the film is that these aren't just kids; they are adults, and so they have the access to certain things that adults would have access to that lead to very Kitano-like consequences of violence and things. So that's one aspect of that. But then the other aspect is when kids play on the playground, sometimes they get into fights, they get into arguments, but they also make up. And there are also aspects of the character interactions where you see this lovely way that relationships that are broken end up becoming mended or repaired, in this lovely sense of kids on the playground type of saying sorry and then going back to the way they were. And their characters use certain little details of Japanese, like ice cream and eating ice cream in hot weather, and just little details like that that really serve the function of this kids on the playground type of storyline really nicely. And so I love how these elements of Japanese society and details of Japanese living figure into this depiction of these characters. And that's why I think, or those are some of the reasons why I think this film, Santayon X Jugatsu, excuse me, or in English, Boiling Point, I think is a real treat. It's, as I say, very quirky, it's a very odd pace. There are feelings of slowness and stillness, but then it turns quite shocking, and then there are moments of modesty and pensive appreciation of the face and of the environment, and then there are great moments of very all of a sudden bursts of energy and the like. And so this kind of beautifully applied imbalance, I think, is made effective quite poignantly in the hands of Takeshi Kitano. And it's a story that, as I say, it does feature Kitano. It does feel like it has a long it has a long kind of progression of the narrative, but I think that's really wonderful because, as I say, it's in the minutiae of the detail of these characters that are, in a sense, like kids in the playground. And so we see these little details that turn into further details, that turn into further details, that turn into further details, that turn into this. We end up in a different part of Japan entirely, and that keeps going on and on and on until we get to the climax of the film. So I love this progress of the plot that relies on the minutiae of day-to-day human interaction. So that makes the characters all the more human, and at the same time the volatility and moral ambiguity and frightening aspect to the nature of some of the characters, as well as the balance that's struck with the comedic aspect, I think overall makes this film really fascinating and an interesting stop along the way in an exploration of the filmography of the one, the only Takeshi Kitano. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I really appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and Cheers.